All right, so living forever, I bet you're curious, and honestly, who isn't? We've got a ton of research here on this whole human immortality thing, and it's a lot more complicated than just uploading your brain to a computer, that's for sure.
Yeah, definitely more to it than that. We're talking like real science, cutting edge tech, and some pretty philosophical questions too.
We're really diving deep today, folks. News articles, scientific papers, even some of those futurist predictions, all to see if this immortality by 2030 idea is, well, is it even possible?
The goal is to really unpack this whole concept of human immortality, see what's actually being researched, and try to figure out what does it all mean for humanity. It's a wild ride, so buckle up.
Okay, so to start, I think we have to talk about Ray Kurzweil, right? He's made some pretty impressive predictions about technology in the past.
Oh, for sure. Like back in the 90s, think about it. Smartphones everywhere, the internet blowing up like it did. Sounded like sci-fi then.
Yeah.
But he pretty much nailed it.
Exactly. So when this guy says we could be immortal by 2030, well, I'm listening.
Yeah, 2030, that's not that far off.
Not at all. So how does he think we'll get there?
Nanobots, that's the key. Tiny robots, like in our blood, fixing damage, at a cellular level.
So these nanobots, they wouldn't just treat diseases, they'd actually, reverse the aging process? Is that what he's saying?
Exactly. We're talking about repairing DNA mutations, telomere shortening, all the stuff that makes our cells age and, well, break down.
It seems like that's a lot to ask from something so tiny. What are the limitations of nanotech right now? I mean, can they even do that?
Well, I mean, nanobots are being used in some medical stuff today, like delivering drugs to specific cells, but we're nowhere near those kinds of complex repairs Kurzweil is talking about. To have nanobots identify and fix damaged DNA, like in real time, it's a massive engineering challenge.
I mean, it sounds like we're decades away, maybe even centuries, right?
Yeah, hard to say for sure, but the field is moving fast. And Kurzweil, he doesn't stop there. He also predicts these nanobots will be able to connect our brains, like directly to the cloud, expanding our cognitive abilities.
Wait, hold on. Brain-computer interfaces? Isn't that still mostly science fiction?
Not entirely. We've seen some pretty amazing stuff lately.
Yeah.
They've developed implants, that let paralyzed patients control prosthetic limbs just with their thoughts and even, like, spell out words on a screen.
Whoa, really? So we're talking like actual two-way communication between the brain and a computer?
Yeah, but it's, still early days. Yeah. The signals they can decode are pretty basic, like move left or, select this letter. But a full-on conversation with the cloud, accessing all that information instantly, that's a whole other thing.
It's incredible to think about, but it raises some questions, doesn't it? Like, what happens to our sense of self if we're, like, always connected to the internet? Are we even human anymore?
That's a key question. Kurzweil, he sees this merging of human and artificial intelligence as the next step in evolution. He calls it the singularity.
Okay, so break that down for me. What is the singularity exactly, and how does it relate to this idea of immortality?
So the singularity it's his point, right, where AI becomes so advanced it surpasses human intelligence. Kurzweil believes this will lead to, like, this huge explosion of technological growth. AI driving all future innovation, basically.
If this happens when? He gave a date.
2045, that's his prediction.
Yeah.
By 2045, AI will be, get this, 1 billion times more powerful than all human intelligence combined.
1 billion? Wow, okay, bold prediction, but I still don't see how this gets us to living forever.
So Kurzweil thinks once AI hits that level of, super intelligence, it'll be able to solve all our problems. Aging, disease, everything. We'd be able to upgrade our bodies and minds, basically extending our lifespans, indefinitely.
So it's not just living longer, it's about, like, transcending our current limitations, becoming something more.
Exactly. He goes a path towards a godlike existence, unlimited knowledge, creativity, potential. It's a lot to take in.
Yeah, my head's spinning a little bit. But before we get too lost in the singularity, I think it's important to remember that, Kurzweil isn't the only one looking into this whole immortality thing, right?
Oh, absolutely. There are other researchers, organizations, all taking different approaches, some more radical than others.
Let's talk about those. Where do we go from here?
Well, one really interesting approach is, the idea of transferring human consciousness into something non-biological. Like, imagine uploading your mind to a computer, becoming a digital being.
That sounds like straight out of a sci-fi movie. Is anyone actually working on that?
Yeah, for real.
Yeah.
There's this guy, Dmitry Itskov, a Russian entrepreneur. He started this thing called the 2045 Initiative, and their goal is, Well, cybernetic immortality by, you guessed it, 2045.
Oh yeah, that rings a bell. Didn't we touch on that earlier? What exactly are they doing to, make this whole sci-fi thing actually happen?
So it's like a multi-stage project, right? And it starts with developing these like really advanced avatars. Think robots, but way more advanced that we can control with our minds.
They're like those brain-controlled prosthetics we were talking about, where someone can just think about moving their arm and the prosthetic actually
Yeah,
moves.
exactly.
Yeah.
But that's just the first step. The next stage gets, well, it gets a lot more complex and ethically challenging. They're talking about transplanting a human brain into an artificial body,
Eh.
like actual cyborgs.
A brain transplant. Whoa, that's intense. But wouldn't that just be like trading one failing body for another? How long would a cyborg body even last, I wonder?
Yeah, those are good questions. And the 2045 initiative, they know there are huge scientific and ethical hurdles for sure, but their ultimate goal is even more ambitious.
Okay, I gotta ask, what could be more ambitious than a brain transplant?
They want to create, get this, a holographic avatar. So like a digital copy of a person, but existing entirely in the virtual world. That's where they want to house a person's consciousness.
So no physical body at all, just a hologram. I can't even imagine what that would even feel like.
Right. It's like we're entering this totally uncharted territory.
Yeah.
It raises these huge questions about like, what does it even mean to be human?
It's definitely exciting, but also a little creepy, to be honest. But while we're talking about like pushing the boundaries, what about cryopreservation? Is freezing yourself a real path to immortality?
Cryopreservation or cryonics, yeah, it's a totally different approach.
Yeah.
It's about preserving a person's body or just the brain at super low temperatures after they, legally die, hoping that future tech can revive them.
So it's basically like a bet on the future, like hoping that someday scientists will figure out how to like undo the damage from freezing and bring people back.
Pretty much. It's a long shot, definitely. The
Mm.
science behind it is still, in its early stages. We don't even know if it's possible to preserve the brain's structure and information, in a way that would allow for revival.
So it's a big gamble with no guarantees. What are the biggest challenges facing cryonics right now?
Well, one of the biggest ones is preventing ice crystals from forming when they freeze the body. Ice crystals damage cells and tissues, which makes revival, well, really difficult, if not impossible. Researchers are trying different cryoprotected solutions, to minimize that damage.
So they're trying to freeze people without like actually forming ice. That's wild. What about the brain itself though? Can we actually preserve like memories and personality?
That's the big question, and we don't know yet.
Hmm.
Some neuroscientists think that our memories, personality, all that, it's encoded in the brain's synaptic connections, the trillions of connections between neurons.
So if we could somehow preserve those connections, we could theoretically preserve the person.
That's the idea.
Yeah.
But even if we could perfectly preserve the brain, we'd still need to figure out how to revive it and then how to integrate it with a new body or even a virtual environment.
Feels like we're back in sci-fi territory again. But it's amazing to see so many like brilliant people working on this from different angles. It really shows how deeply we as humans want to overcome death.
Yeah, absolutely. This whole quest for immortality, it touches on so much about being human, our fear of death, our search for meaning, our drive to push the limits of what's possible. It's a topic that sparks so much debate and speculation.
And for good reason. We've covered a lot today. Nanobots, brain uploads, cryonics. It's a lot to take in. But before we jump into the ethical and societal stuff, I want to pause for a second. What stands out to you, the listener? What are your initial thoughts on all this?
What seems promising? What seems, well, maybe a little troubling? And for you personally, would you choose to live forever if you could?
It's a question worth thinking about because the choices we make today, they're going to shape the future of humanity. It's kind of crazy to think about how much could change if we actually achieve immortality. We talked about the science, but what about society? How would that be affected?
That's where things get really, really interesting. Imagine, like, a world where death just isn't a thing anymore. What happens to our values, relationships, our institutions even?
Yeah, like would people even get married? I mean, if you knew you could be with someone for like centuries, would we even care about being young if no one aged?
Those are those are huge questions. Think about it. Our entire society, it's built around the idea that life is finite. Legacy, family, all that. It's all about making the most of the time we have. If we take death out of the equation, well, everything changes.
And work. Retirement. Would we even need those concepts anymore? Would people still work if they didn't have a limited lifespan?
Maybe we'd see like a total shift in how we think about work and leisure. Imagine people cycling through different careers over centuries, pursuing like all sorts of passions and becoming experts in so many
It
things.
sounds kind of nice, actually, but wouldn't that also like completely mess up the economy? I mean, our systems are all built around a workforce that, enters and exits at a certain rate.
Exactly. Immortality would throw everything off.
Yeah.
Retirement planning, Social Security, even inheritance, we'd have to rethink it all.
And what about the environment? More people constantly, I mean, that would put a huge strain on resources, and we're already struggling with overpopulation and climate change.
That's a critical point. If we figure out immortality but don't solve those problems, well, it won't matter much, will it?
Hmm.
We need sustainable ways to, produce food, energy, manage waste, all that. But for a population that could potentially never stop growing.
It's like every answer just leads to more questions. And what about AI? We're already worried about it becoming smarter than us, right? Would immortality speed that up?
It's definitely possible. I mean, if we're always upgrading our brains, merging with technology, the line between human and artificial intelligence could just, disappear.
Maybe we could end up like competing with our own
A
creations.
lot of futurists and sci-fi writers have explored that idea. It raises a lot of questions about control, ethics, what does it even mean to be human anymore?
If we achieve immortality but lose our humanity, what's the point?
That's the question, isn't it? This quest for immortality is not just about science or technology. It's a philosophical question that forces us to really examine, our values, our fears, our hopes for the future.
So much to think about. As we wrap up this deep dive, what's the one thing you want our listener to take away from all this?
I think the most important thing is to, be critical. Think for yourself. Don't just buy into the hype or the fear,
Mm.
Do your own research, look at the evidence, and come to your own conclusions.
And remember, the future isn't set in stone. We shape it with the choices we make. Kurzweil said AI could be the next step in evolution, right? But what kind of future will we create with it? One where humanity thrives? Or one where we, well, become obsolete? That's something I hope you'll keep thinking about long after this deep dive is over. Thanks for joining us.